All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So Nick here. I'm here with Jae York.
Hi guys.
You offered that we should do a video together,
Yes.
and then I was like, great, let's do an interview for the Children's Media Revolution. And then immediately you're like, let's do it in a tree.
Because that's where all revolutions happen, people. They start in trees.
Start in trees. Oh man, so
Hello.
the last probably half hour, 45 minutes was us figuring out how to film in a tree. I've never filmed in a tree before.
I've only filmed with my phone. That's it.
Yeah. I've never filmed in a tree before. I've never filmed in a situation where I'm afraid a branch will break. Like,
Are you okay with where you're at? You
yeah,
feel good? You feel comfortable?
I might.
You can even put your leg over. I don't even know if that's comfortable or not.
No, this is
this
good?
Is
fine.
You're feeling okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure you're feeling like you're feeling. This is a sturdy branch.
This is a sturdy branch. This little branch here might break if I put too much.
That's not.
Not this
sturdy.
one. This one by, my butt.
Yeah, that one's not good. We're just trying to make sure the scene is secure, because the worst thing would be like, a Goetze goes across, all the news media, like, 2 young filmmakers die in tragic film.
That would be a horrible end to a revolution.
It never even started, people.
Never even started.
That's not going to happen. We're just trying to make sure that doesn't happen by being safe.
Branch.
Yeah, you need to, I feel like I should come back more, but
Yeah.
it's hard.
Okay. It's fine.
You good?
This is the part of the deal. Doing in the. Okay, so let's talk media of today. That was the subject that I want to talk about. State of media today, and what are our thoughts on it? What's working? What's not working? And you specialize more in teen media.
Yeah, I'd say like tween media, because it's like
Tween media.
yeah, kind of like 8 and above is kind of like, I feel like I see that a lot, just because of the observational research I've had to do for my job being a child guardian, and working with kids in that like I feel like I always get like the 6 to like 12-year-old range, and even 6 to 13. That's like kind of always been my thing.
What's the best show on television?
Currently?
Yeah. For the tween age.
For the tween age. Like, this is gonna sound really silly. One of my favorite shows, I think Kratz is great. Kratz is just great. I think that's one of the better shows.
Yeah.
And I love it because it infuses, I love the combination of live action and animation in that. Mm-hmm. And then also just the quality of the filming, the quality of the educational and entertainment.
Right. Yeah.
The entertaining educational content.
And I'm glad they switched to having more live action, because the Kratz, in my opinion, like they do great on camera as themselves, and just like their love for animals comes really through. Whereas Kratz Creatures, I think, was all animation.
Yeah.
Which I think defeats the purpose, because then it's like, and it was like sci-fi, and it just then okay, not that there's something wrong with that. It's just like there's something more powerful to like, hey, this is a real animal that I'm holding in my hand right now. And they like went way up close to the animals. Like they're like incredible.
And your connection, you're going to develop, like a kid, if they, for instance, are seeing it via a cartoon, they're not going to develop the empathy to that they would if it was a real animal or a real person. And that's the problem with media right now, and segueing a little into that.
Yeah.
Is the lack of live action content.
Live action.
Because we're real people in this world.
Yeah.
And like right now we're having an entire generation programmed of cartoon-based kids.
Right.
Even PBS is like heavy content in the whole like animation thing, and it's cheap to produce. I get it, but the problem it's going to create is I
think it's more expensive to produce, from what I understand of animation. Live action does take it's more the international sales are a lot better with animation, because you can overdub, and with the technologies you can sync up new languages a lot easier.
That makes
so the
sense.
Internet, like you can get it into China and to India.
So it's a global market.
It's much better for the global market. And then so the live action stuff tends to be stuff that's just more local. So just for like Sprout, like the people on Sprout, it's just like those are for New York kids. for the most part. And then like stuff that's like, what is it? The Place in like Toronto or whatever. Like that's all, or The Space. I think it's called The Space. That's all live action, but it's just for they don't show that anywhere outside of like their I forget what Canadian states are. I'm so bad.
It's all good.
What's a Canadian state? What's the state of Canada? That's another thing. Yeah. What do you think of that? What do you think of that stuff?
As far as what exactly?
I don't know. Just thoughts.
Well, I wanted to make one
Put it
more
back to
comment back on the good
Sure.
content.
Yeah.
Is one of my favorite kind of tweeny shows is this show called Mako Mermaid.
Mako Mermaid.
Mako
Okay.
Mermaid. If you've ever seen it.
I think I've seen. I haven't actually seen the show, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I am a huge fan of Mako Mermaids because it has guys and girls. It has multicultural. I mean, to
Cool.
some extent, not
Cool.
like it could be better as far as being multicultural, but it's an Australian produced show, and it
Oh, of course.
totally
Anything
has-
mermaids comes from Australia. They
Well,
love mermaids.
They do, and they actually have legit morals, and like they have like problem solving with friends versus
Yeah.
like problem starting. Where I feel like there's a lot of like shows that like don't really show kids how to solve problems
Okay.
with their friends and families, and I feel like this show like shows the kinds of problems that you have with your friends and your
okay.
family.
Yeah.
And then it shows you like useful ways to deal with it.
Right,
And
yeah.
not like in an annoying way, but like
Right.
in a real way. And I really like that kind of content. And it also has like the real like storyline of like, you know, pulling in the mystic, you know, realm of like mythology.
The mythology, yeah.
Yeah, which I really like.
mermaid allows us because like the mystery of the ocean. There's so many different ways you can go with that,
Absolutely.
and it's also very it's just kind of like a unique kind of niche of fantasy that's pretty cool to explore.
Absolutely. But I think it's because it's made in Australia and not here. That's why it's actually quality.
Oh yeah.
Like, I hate to say it.
Burn.
I'm sorry, America. And I think honestly, Americans like are producing this kind of content. It's just the media overlords that aren't letting it get onto the big
overlords.
networks. Sorry, people. But I mean,
yeah, there's-
Netflix.
yeah.
I will say, like, you know, I was reading an article the other day, and they're discussing how the bigwig there, and I'm not going to name names because there's no reason to, but he is excited about creating more educational content for kids, he says. And that makes me excited because we need, like, you can have fun educational content. I mean,
Yeah.
like, to be honest, none of the shows going on right now I'm that excited about. Like, it's really the old shows that I'm most excited about.
Yeah.
That I would love to see kind of like that kind of stuff be brought back in. Like the Bill Nye. Loved it. Magic School Bus. They're doing Magic School Bus again, but the kids don't like it.
Any kind of reboot, like it's difficult to do a reboot because it's like a whole new team. So how do you recreate the magic of the previous team? They might have a couple people, and then it's like you have a new like Miss Frizzle. Right, and then
yes, and she's insecure. She's not like she's an insecure teacher pandering for the children's approval, and the kids
so it changes,
know it.
Not that is necessarily bad, I think, but I think the issue is that's not the Magic School Bus. Magic School Bus is Miss Frizzle shows up. She's going to show you something, and you're going to learn, and you're going to love it.
Yeah,
you know,
and she's
like,
the leader.
She's the leader. Yeah, she's a leader.
And the
Yeah,
problem
yeah.
is the teacher in the new one is not a leader. She's like a non-confident, trying to be cool. When you're trying to be cool, you're not a leader. And
Yeah, you can't do it.
can't do it.
You can't do it.
You can't do it.
You have to do what needs to be done, even if it's an unpopular thing. you know,
Yeah.
and while simultaneously listening to other people, but like ultimately, you got to call the shots in the end. And it takes having been a manager in a like managing a small team of I think it was probably like 20 employees that I was overseeing. It was tough. I had to learn to be more confident in ways I didn't even realize were possible. Yeah. Yeah. And I think exploring that is okay. It's just like it does it like it's just so hard to like reboot something, and then you got to make it different and new, but you also have to recreate the magic. And I think Magic School Bus, like, I don't know, I saw the pilot and I didn't really want to watch anything beyond that.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
We literally watched the pilot and then the first episode, and the kids were like, that I was watching it with, and we were doing a review on it, they were like, we are not watching one more episode.
And yeah,
this is terrible.
which is the importance of a good pilot, which I think also I want to like expand this too, is like what are good pilots and whatnot, especially since a lot of people making stuff, they're going to be making pilots. So I want to I think it'd be good to have you and maybe those kids too, like talk about that pilot, what went well, what didn't.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and one thing I want to bring up, I did some research this morning, and this was all like just like, I'll just say it disturbed my soul a little bit.
Oh boy, here we go. Yeah. You texted me about this a little bit.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I researched was just like, okay, as far as Parrot Analytics is a analytical company that you pay like a lot of the top media companies pay to do analytics on what are the most popular by clicks, by social media, by views. What is the current state of the most popular content being consumed right now by kids? And like the top 10 disturbed me in the sense that it was number 1, SpongeBob SquarePants still.
Okay, yeah. That
I feel dumber every time I watch it.
To any of you, it is a very interesting show because it is simultaneously really dumb and really brilliant, I think is what it does. And it's entirely rewatchable. So, but is it, yeah, I think getting into, is it good content? Well, the kids love it, right? That there's a good reason why kids love it.
It's split though.
So why do you hate it?
Some kids don't.
So you say it's dumb. So back that up. Like why is it dumb?
I think for me, like, I just, like, I want to be challenged as a human being immediately. I want to, like, be pushed to the edge of the horizon.
Okay.
And a lot of the kids that I work with are really smart kids.
Yeah.
And they want to be pushed. And they're just like, why are we hearing these sounds and these goofy, like, weirdnesses? And, like, sometimes it's like maybe we're too serious as people. And, like, we just want something a little bit more serious and not so, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're like,
Yeah. So, sorry, I don't mean to.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
it.
Okay.
I think that's
do we need that to happen in comedy? Is I guess another question.
I think like I like blips of like, blah, you know, like
Okay.
I like that.
Yeah.
But I don't want an entire show dosage of that.
No, but like what? So what would be the ideal comedy then?
Well, to me, like the ideal comedies are like really like mockumentaries, where it's like real life happening.
Okay.
But then you just like are pointing out all of the ridiculous, hilarious things happening, and then just the natural comedic stuff flows through.
So
that's my favorite.
So you learn something about humanity
naturally
by watching the comedy.
Yeah, by naturally watching it unfold. That's my personal.
And also,
thing.
like, I think there's also a difference between what's good, what's good for children, what's good for adults. Like adults, like
totally different.
If you want to waste your time watching guilty pleasure TV shows, which I do, also, there's some.
All of us are guilty.
Yeah, right.
Every one of us.
But then for children, like, is it like? Should they? I guess the question then is, should they be in charge? Like, how much should they be in charge of watching what they want to watch versus what we think they should watch? Like, who knows better? Hi. We get some stares from people. We're probably a good 20 feet up right now.
A lot of, oh, hello.
Oh. What are they doing up there?
It's always
about children's media. No.
It is disturbing for people. I will say I read books and trees frequently, and people are very like, they point at you frequently, and they're like, are they all there? Are they okay? And then other people are like, yes, go, way to be in the tree.
Well, it's breaking social norms.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, man. Like, didn't we like climb trees at one point in our evolutionary past? Like, wasn't that a big deal for us?
Yeah, it's a big deal. Well, yeah, like you get views. It's like for hunting. It's
for
good
hunting.
For, vitamin D, closer to the sun.
Yeah.
Athleticism.
Yeah, that 20 feet closer to the sun.
Yeah. Finding food.
Finding food. Oh, yeah. Finding food. Yeah.
I mean, that's part of hunting, but you could also forage for berries for the vegans.
There's people whose jobs are to like climb coconut trees and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still.
But to get back to children's media, so what do you think of that question? How much how much should adults be in charge of what children's watch? And we have two categories of adults. We have the parent caregiver team, and then we have the actual content creators, the teams behind. So, because if we just think about the parents, then the SpongeBob team makes how they can make their show as stupid as they want.
Absolutely.
And then it's up to the parents to determine whether or not that's good for the child. And the child, and then the child could want to stupid stuff isn't pleasurable to watch. So, and right. Because we can talk about that more a little bit later when we talk about YouTube too, because that's a big thing as well.
Absolutely. And I think it really comes down to expression. Create whatever we want to create, put it out there, because that's the way we should have it in the world. Yeah. We need freedom of expression. You're welcome to make quality kids shows. You're welcome to make shows that aren't quality for kids. But I think it really is up to the parents to help guide their kids to be the kids and the future human beings they think the world needs.
Right.
Because ultimately, that is kind of a job of a parent, is being helping their kids, guiding them to be good human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you were saying something too about a lesson, and I don't want to misphrase you, but I think that's good. I think now's a good time to talk about that.
It's the perfect time for that. I think that just in general, this is the time right now where our media, and I think that shows should start letting kids know. I know in the shows that I want to make, I want to bring up, hey kids, just so you know, when you watch media, I want you to be a smart consumer, and I want you to essentially know what they're doing to you when you watch it. And so whether it's YouTube, with the product, placements, or even advertisements that they consume, or even, dialogue that is strategically developed to create a disrespectful youth against authority, and helping kids be able to look out for those kinds of messages. I think is key. And
I think also, because this gets to another thought that I think about too, is so when it comes to food, you are what you eat, right? And Absolutely. Then I think it's also you can broaden that to you are what you consume. That if all you do is watch political YouTube videos, you will become more political, right? Like that,
Absolutely.
At least maybe not necessarily in action, but in how you think. I know that because sometimes I'm just binge watching political theater.
Well, we're all guilty of it, right? I can say from kids watching too many YouTube videos to our grandparents watching too much Fox News or CNBC or whatever political spectrum, whatever network caters to whatever belief system they want to reinforce in their minds. Yeah. I think it's really important to teach kids how what they watch and view becomes part of who they are, and it literally programs them. We are programmable human beings. We're like robots in that way. If we hang out with certain people who talk a certain way, let's say we hang out with people who gossip, who use a lot of swearing or don't use proper English, or whatever the situation is, you become who you hang out with, just like you're going to become like the shows you watch. Kids, I remember one of the things and one of the reasons I even wanted to get into kids media was I literally watched how Disney's shows back in the day, and this was 6 years ago, the kids would be snarky essentially, and the kids imitate it. So the viewer imitates that. So after, some of these Disney shows.
It makes a lot of sense. Now that you say that, because you said that before, and I can think back to a time where I was a substitute for an after-school program, and the teacher didn't supervise them at all. It was freaking Lord of the Flies in there, and then there's this one girl who literally sat on a throne. I kid you not, because it was in this athletic gym. So she'd make a foam throne to sit on, and she'd boss the other kids around. and then she was like,
became the queen.
She became the queen, and then like she was like, she would like make fun of me, and like she found like all my weak spots. Like she knew that by like, because I was balding, I was like really self-conscious about being like going bald, and so she like anytime like I was like trying to scold her or whatever, she'd be like, "Oh, you're bald" or whatever.
Oh my god!
And then she'd like pass it off as a joke. So like, well, and then I'm like, should I laugh at the joke? Like it was like very
manipulative.
It felt very manipulative, and I, you know, like, but then you think of like these Disney shows, like especially. I'm thinking from 6 years ago. I'm not too key on what's actually happening right now, aside from one show. but like those behaviors, like you see those, like it's just like it's funny. It's like making fun of adults.
Oh yeah.
It's making fun of like
and
how they look.
Parents are weak.
Parents are weak, and then
especially the dads. They want the dads, like, and this is something I've heard from multiple dads. They hate it how the dads are portrayed as weaker than the moms.
Do you think that has to do with the current, like, political? Because this is where like it all everything ties together.
I think media has always done this.
Media has always portrayed men as weaker.
I wouldn't say always done it, but I'll say like even in the '90s I noticed it, and I think it's probably it's shifted a little bit in different ways, and I think it depends on the network who's producing it. But I've definitely noticed that they'll make men look weaker sometimes, depending on the show. Like Dr. Quinn Medicine's Woman was a perfect example of this in the 90s.
Okay.
Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, it's a woman empowerment show. It's a woman medicine doctor, you know?
Yeah, I remember watching that show.
It was a great show, but like my dad actually pointed that out to us, and I love that. He's like, do you notice that all of the men in this show besides Scully are weak? And, you know, there's only a couple characters that were like really strong male characters. Yeah. And it was interesting because it was just and I think that's just an interesting observation to make. And I think this also brings up another point that we should talk about, is parents, you know, there's obviously content kids are going to watch by themselves, right?
Yeah.
But one of the most powerful things families can do is watch shows together and then talk about the shows afterwards.
I agree with that. I think that's the kind of stuff that I want to make too, is like I want to make a show that parents and children want to watch together, and then they want to talk about it, and then like something, you know, that like, well, what did you think of that? You know, do you think that character made the right decision and whatnot? Like that's, you know, that kind of stuff. That's the ideal.
Absolutely.
So, do you have ideas how to get there? How to make that kind of stuff?
How to make that kind of content?
Yeah.
Well, I think honestly, like when you connect to the human spirit, when you connect to the human heart, that is where we're going to have much more profound conversations. When you get to the point of like humans connecting with humans, humans engaging with other people in their neighborhoods, when you're seeing how humans are like living out their passions, how people are, they're like maybe there's a community issue and like showing how a community is addressing that issue. Just things that are going to engage thought and things that are going to engage like how to deal with the world that we're living in.
Yeah.
I think because kids, I feel like one of the things that bothers me, and kids even have told me this, is that they are frustrated with how they're talked to like they're stupid. And they want to be empowered more. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things, like kids would love to have more news kind of things. We don't need to share with what the normal news is sharing, because that's a very slighted conversation.
It's hard to do any news without some sort of bias.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you can bring up the important things going on in the world, you know, like caring for, you know, people in your community, including things on what's happening in our environments, in our local communities, in our parks, you know, things that kids can get involved with. And I think that's important.
Well, this is, I think, talking about something that I also want to talk about, which is this, it's kind of like a spectrum, or it's like, it's very confusing to me to kind of think about it, because it spirals in and stuff. So it comes down to like alphabet and numbers for preschool, because I do mostly preschool and kindergarten kind of content. So a lot of stuff on YouTube and on air is focusing on teaching kids letters, numbers, shapes. Yeah. It's very STEM focused, and then very curriculum focused. which I think there's a problem with curriculum focused stuff and everything like with PBS. My big issue with PBS is that almost everything has to have a curriculum focus to it, because that's how they get the money, so that they can show that like they can have kids sit down and watch a show, and then did they learn the facts that they needed to learn, and that's how you prove that the show was effective in teaching those facts. And there's probably more to it, but that's how it keeps getting described to me of the process. And I think that problem with that is reflects the same problem with American schools.
Absolutely.
And so we're testing kids. It's like we're testing kids in schools, and then we're also kind of testing kids when they're watching TV as well. And then what is it? It's like it's stuff, and this is like the alphabet and numbers. Like, don't get me wrong, it's good to know alphabet and numbers. I'm not saying that, but it becomes a point where you want your child to recite the alphabet.
Yeah. And
you value the reciting the alphabet more than the desire to learn the alphabet.
Yeah.
And I think that's what like I want to get across. I think you too. And I think where we kind of need to focus more in, and that in itself is because the idea is like we don't want to teach kids what we want to learn. We want to teach kids what they want to learn and how they want to learn it, and what they really need to learn.
Absolutely.
But how do we know all that stuff? Because it's always coming from an adult perspective.
Well, this is one of the cool things that, like, this is a perfect example. One of the things that I studied a little bit about was just like how ancient cultures would teach, right?
Okay.
And so they'd go out with like an elder, and the elder, would bring up, they'd go out and they'd do like experiential learning things, where the kids would be the ones engaging, kind of guiding. They'd be almost the ones leading the process.
Yeah.
And then the elder would be guiding them.
Okay.
So they would be like running ahead, right? Pointing out things. But the elder would be guiding them and asking them questions that would essentially open doors for them to like ask more questions and engage back.
I think that's a good point. Like, getting kids to ask more questions, because the kinds of questions that they ask reflect what is important to them. Yes,
absolutely.
And then giving answers in a way that doesn't cut off any questions, right? Like you want to keep the questions coming.
Well,
and ultimately I want children to think for themselves. I don't want, and this is what's kind of scary to me. I don't want children to think the way I think. I want children to think the way that they should think. Like I don't want to claim like I have all the answers.
Absolutely.
I do my best to find the right facts and everything.
Yeah. I think that's an important thing to even set the stage on, is that kids kind of have this thing, and I know you probably were raised this way. I don't want to assume that, but I can ask you that. When I was a kid, and it took me until I got to be almost an adult to like fully realize it. And I actually remind the kids that I work with daily now this exact thing, is that parents don't know everything. Teachers don't know everything. No. Nobody knows everything. So it's kind of like, as unconventional educators working in media, the most important thing we can do is educate everyone. Nobody knows everything.
No one knows everything, yeah.
And it's okay to ask questions. And that was one of the things that my dad said he loved about me as a kid, which I thought was interesting. He said, I was always scared to ask questions because I didn't want to come across as dumb.
Oh my God, same here. Oh, it just shut off. All right, and then since we got so excited to get going, let's, Jay, do you want to talk about how you got in here and into this tree? How you got?
Well, all I can say is I got into this tree. I've always loved trees. First grade, I actually told my teacher that I didn't need to learn how to read, because my job when I grew up was going to be working with video. And I didn't need to learn how to read or write, so none of the book things I was concerned about. I'm like, I'm going to be working with videos and trees. And I literally told my teacher that in first grade. And they're like, no, you need to learn how to read. And I was like, but I don't think that's necessary. I'm really glad I did, though.
Yeah. Well, Tim Ferriss once said, and I think this also gets into the alphabet thing that will probably come later in the video. But Tim Ferriss said that he didn't want to read at all, and that he didn't want to read. He didn't want to learn the alphabet. So this is like back in like kindergarten or whatever. And he was telling his teachers like, and he was the last kid in the classroom to learn any letters. And his teacher's like, Tim, like, why don't you want to learn to read? And he was like, well, or why don't you want to know letters? And he was like, why? And he's like, well, Tim, if you learn letters, then you can read. And if you know how to read, you can learn anything. And then he learned his alphabet in like a week.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Which also like gets to sorry, I lost track of that a little bit. But which also gets to like kids, like you don't need to force feed the alphabet to kids and stuff, because when the kid wants to learn, they'll just learn it.
They'll totally
right?
learn it.
And it might be a year later than everyone else, but it's not like they're too inhibited and then they're back on track, you know? So like
it's very true.
Force feeding alphabet is not
force feeding anything.
Is not necessary. Force feeding anything is not necessary.
Absolutely.
So then, so what kind of stuff have you been doing in
between 5
years old and this tree?
Now, 34 and 5. A lot has happened between 5 and 34. Essentially, my original path, I really wanted to become a child life therapist. That was like my goal. And I studied children's development or child development. I studied counseling children, art therapy, and I went down that path for a long time. And then after some in-depth internships and getting ready to shift into bigger programs, I had a couple family friends take me aside and say, "You're really creative, and this job we feel like is gonna just suck the soul out of you." And so as a child life therapist, they're like, we've been doing this for 30 something years.
I heard that too, yeah, like, because I want to be a child psychologist somewhere, and then it's like, yeah, it's very light. And then people are saying, yeah, you have to have support groups. You got to meet weekly, otherwise you go crazy. You have to have a routine, because there's stuff that's happening in this world. It's just,
you have to learn how to protect yourself. Like
yeah.
yourself, just because it's just so exhausting emotionally as a human being to work in that kind of field. So I ended up going in a very odd path. It wasn't that odd, because I'd always been a designer ever since I was a little kid. I was always designing things. I was always creating things. And so I had this dream of becoming a surf culture designer for kids. That was like the dream. And I ended up getting a little sidetracked in my dream by an internship that I got that ended up turning into a career path, where I ended up working for a company as a child merchandise product developer.
Cool. Awesome.
So I worked in fashion for kids, for like high-end fashion. So we had like, my products were in like Vogue magazine for kids. It's called like Vogue Bambino or something.
Wow.
And so I did toys for kids, and I worked in Asia, and that whole path really changed me as a person. Like, I love business, and I love international business. I was like really, really loving that. I have this like fight inside of me between the artist and the analytical. And so it's like the artist and the scientist. It's the best way to describe it. And so that's always something, that's why being a product developer was great. But essentially I worked between California and the East Coast, and I was just back and forth all the time. I didn't even know who my neighbors were. And it just got to this point where I was like going to Asia, I was never home, and I was like, kind of had like this split group of friends between West Coast and East Coast, and it was just like one weekend I was on the West Coast, the next weekend was East Coast, and I just felt like I had this very split life. And then going to Asia on top of that, you just kind of like have this big wake-up call of like where you fit in things, like where your place is in the world.
Yeah.
And I was really realizing like how I needed to get into sustainable design work because of what the environmental issues were going on in China and Asia and Vietnam. Just like, you know, the rivers were being like the color of fashion. It was just a lot.
Yeah. It's very poetic.
Yeah,
rivers were the color of fashion.
They were. It was like it was like a joke that was a terrible joke that was going around. It was like, oh, you know, what's the color of the year? Oh wait, don't ask. Just look in the river.
Oh God.
And it was bad. And so I just got to this point where I made a big shift, and I got into doing sustainable design work and community design work, and I left kids fashion, kids product development world, left the toys, left all that stuff, and I ended up getting into working with kids in the community on like gardens and nature-based programs, and just like literally went from being like, you know, that's the way to describe it is painted nails, dyed hair, always the latest hairstyles, latest clothes, designer clothes, to purging my life of that. No more painting nails, grew my hair out like a hippie, you know.
Right, yeah, going totally opposite.
I went totally opposite. I just went from fashion to farm hippie and like grassroots organizer in my community, and just like started getting involved with farming of all things, and
That's
kids
wonderful.
nutrition. Yeah, kids
That's
nutrition
wonderful,
was
yeah.
like super big, and kids gardening.
And
So-
then how? What's the timeline to media?
So essentially, in that switch, I was in a severe car accident, and one of my doctors said, you need a more kinesthetic job, because your job as a designer, sitting down, working in the farm is great, but it's honestly a little too hard of labor. And they were just like, we really think you should do some kind of creative movement, do nanny work, whatever. And I was just like, I like that. And randomly, I had been like babysitting for people here and there. And then this lady like contacts me out of the blue from the internet and is like, will you be my kid's nanny? And I'm just like, well, sure. And it was like a part-time nanny thing, so I could still do my design work and do
Nice.
that.
Yeah.
So that's when I started watching kids media, because I, you know, like make kids snacks, and then we're like watch a show like after we get home. And that's when I had the wake up call. That's when I saw literally how kids are being programmed. And I just was like, I would, you know, we'd watch a Disney show, we'd get snarky, bratty, disrespectful kids who wouldn't listen to their parents. Then we'd watch Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers.
Yes. And this is like Mr. Rogers socks.
Oh yeah, let's see him. If you can.
I don't know if you can see that.
We'll let's put it.
We'll zoom in
We'll
later.
zoom in later. B-roll.
That was a weird move. It was like, oh, a weird leg up in the air.
Thumbnail. Found my thumbnail. Cool.
So Mr. Rogers would essentially turn the kids, his programming, the kids would become thoughtful, they'd become cooperative, they'd become inquisitive, they'd want to explore. And so
Interesting.
anything that Mr. Rogers was doing, right?
Yeah.
If you like got the pool out and he was getting his feet in the pool, we got to find buckets, we have to find a pool. If he was working with clay, whatever he was doing, they wanted to do.
Oh wow.
If he was doing magic tricks, they wanted to learn the magic tricks. And then like, oh wait, not just that one magic trick, they wanted to like get into magic then.
Oh,
So he would
nice.
spark, and that's what I think
sparks,
is he'd
yeah.
spark the interest. And I think that's what we're missing in today's media with kids, is that creative joy of discovery, sparking passion, and sparking that creative desire to learn and go further. And he nailed it.
He nailed it. So I have another video plan too, where I break down one of his 5-part theme weeks, and then because I went to the Fred Rogers Center, and I also have to do a video on like that journey because it's amazing, and you gotta go.
I have to go. Like,
and
it's on my
you gotta
list
go,
weeks.
and everyone's
Everyone.
gotta go. Like it was phenomenal. And then like I'm looking at his handwritten scripts, and I'm analyzing them, and like it just like. I just picked whatever random thing, and it blew my mind. And I realized that this man is the master of an art form that he invented. Like his show, and you can think like, oh, it's just Mr. Rogers, just like puppets. Like, but when you really look into like the storytelling, the story arcs, the conflicts, and people say like, oh well, you know, wasn't there just that? Like I've heard one criticism of Mr. Rogers that the only source of conflict was with Lady Elaine. Not true.
Not true at all.
Not true at all. With this one, there was 3 ongoing conflicts that were all intertwined, and they all came together, in 2 separate times, in like a crisis in episode 3 and then a resolution in episode 5. It's just brilliant. It's just like
now, is that in Neighborhood of Make-Believe the conflicts were happening, or did he have conflict that
he doesn't
bled
really
from
have
his reality into the Neighborhood of Make-Believe?
He doesn't really have all the conflicts were in the Neighborhood of Make-Believe.
Okay.
So like usually the community, like it was just, I think occasionally he would go like whatever the cook or whatever, and he's like, well, I need to do this, and then like he would help that. But the conflicts that I saw were very, very light.
Okay.
If anything, it was much more real. But then how he connects those things, because a lot of times those feel random to me, but how he actually connected them were brilliant. And when you think of it on like a deep psychological level, for instance, like in an episode about learning, that's the one that I want to cover, but to kind of spoil it a little bit. In an episode about learning, and it's like you're kind of being stuffed with knowledge. And so he had, one of those like picture videos.
Yes, I love
where
picture.
He went to a sleeping bag factory where they're stuffing a sleeping bag.
So he's subconsciously.
And then
wow.
And then in the next episode, he goes to a puppet, or like a toy, like a bean toy, like I don't know what the word is for that, but like a plush, but like instead of with beans on the inside, a beanie toy or whatever. And then you see that her like pouring the beads and beans or whatever into this little like childlike doll, so it's just like it all
That's
comes
so
together.
cool.
I got totally sidetracked with my love for Mr. Rogers,
Well,
but
Mr.
we were talking about
every single time.
everything. But
That's
basically,
so
basically, and that's what this channel is about. Hopefully, like we got some subscribers. Thank you for those of you that are subscribing. Please share, by the way.
Absolutely.
Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out what is great content, and can we make it? Can we inspire?
And what do you think is great content?
Yeah, what do you think?
Because we want comments on that, because right now it's like whatever input, and I've been asking so many parents, what is good content
Yeah,
out
parents
there?
know.
What
Parents
do you
know a
think?
lot.
Storybots.
Storybots is great.
Yeah.
It's great.
That's a great one.
So, question of the day: what is the best show on television right now, or the show that your child watches the most? And back up. Question of the day: out of all the shows that your child watches the most, or niece or nephew, or someone that you know, which is the best show and why?
Yeah.
And do you think that has? Can you see some sort of impact on the child and how they're growing? And does it spark any creativity? Like, what does it spark, I guess?
Yeah, what's the spark?
What's the spark?
What's it doing? What's it programming in this kid?
And then I have, I guess briefly, because also this is my channel, so I have kind of like biographical stuff throughout. But briefly, my biography is I went to school for music and psychology. There's a little bit of story about why, but I felt like I kind of wanted to do both. But everyone was telling me, like, you have to choose one. You have, like, you can't do it both unless you want to do music therapy, which I was like, that doesn't interest me. Like that, like, more power to the people that want to do that. That is not, I would not enjoy that. Like, that is just not, it doesn't use music in the way that I like to use it. And it doesn't use psychology in the way that's meaningful for me in that way either. And then a lot of my musicians friends were like, well, you should, like, why don't you just be a bass player? Because I could probably have been a professional bass player and make a living off of that. But that wasn't fulfilling enough for me. I wanted to have an impact.
Yeah.
And then as I'm doing these like music camps or whatnot, I start realizing that I'm really great with kids. And then that kind of spiraled into more and more like teaching kids. And then I'm like, wow, this is like really, really fun for me. And then I took a developmental psychology class, and I was like so nervous. Like, you're in the room and like you're doing like this kind of like this, like a piece of the IQ test with a child. But it's like very informal. There's like a bunch of kids running around in this observation room, and then a bunch of like the students like interacting with the kids, and then I have a conversation with like this 3-year-old or whatever, and then I remember my professor being like, "Wow, that's really good." Like I don't know what, I'm just talking to this kid or whatever, and then she's like, and then she encouraged me too to kind of pursue more.
She's like, you had that connection.
I had that connection early on, so that I guess. I've always kind of had that kind of connection, and then I've just been like honing it and growing it and trying to go deeper into the world of a child and seeing the world through their eyes. And then went to grad school for developmental psychology. that didn't work out. I had a lot of like family issues going on, some health issues.
And when you have that stuff going on, there's no way you can finish that.
There's no way. I had an advisor that, for better or worse, was like basically betting on me to quit grad school from like 6 months in. Like, she was like, "You're not cut out for this. Like, you're gonna fail grad school." Like, she literally had.
She said that.
She didn't.
To you.
Not those words, but that was it. Like, I can tell. Like, and she would be like, "Well, I'm like a gatekeeper for this. We have to keep like the bad psychologists out." Right, like some issues there, right? Like, and I think she had some issues with her dad too, because there's 3 guys in the program. It was a small program, it was like 20, but like only 3 guys. She hated all 3 of us too, so we don't know. We didn't know what was going on there.
Targeting. Wow.
We didn't know what was going on there, but it was not a good relationship. I was like so upset all the time by it. It was very stressful.
A lot of projection.
It was not, and then like I would see like other people with advisors, like they would have the same doubts that I would have, and their advisor would be like encouraging them and be like, "You can do this." I'm like, why don't I have that? But for better or worse, like it kind of, my dad got really sick, so I was like, well, and then I had this other advisor, like Sue, like she was a director of this program that I was working with, and she was like, just go home, you know, like if your dad's that sick, like you don't know what's gonna happen.
Be there.
Be there
for the family.
Be there for
totally.
the family. And so I did that, and that was encouraging. It was like saying the same thing, but like in an encouraging way for like a good reason, you know.
Absolutely.
But so very thankful. And I like wrote her like a Facebook message too. There was like 4 paragraphs, just like thanking her for all the help that she did for that. So I went home, and then I was like, well, what? I could go back to school. That's something they said they'd be willing to have me back, but I'd have to like prove my worthiness or whatever. And then my wife was like, well, you have all these passions. Like, you've always like tried to figure out which one to do. What is there any way that you can do them all in one place?
Combine them, yeah.
And I was visiting. She had moved out to Philly at that point, and I was taking the plane back. And at that time, I like pulled out my notebook and I wrote like a very early sketch to Zero's Rainbow Warriors. Like it was,
wow.
like it's changed to the point where like I didn't realize, like I thought I made a new show for Zero's Rainbow Warriors, but I look back, it's like, no, that was it. That was it. You know,
that was
like,
the original.
That was the first version of it.
That's so cool.
And then it just from there is like, well, okay, this is what I want to do. How do I do it? You know, where do I go? I had people be like, well, you know, go to public access media places, because they like it's an amazing resource for anyone that wants to do this stuff. You sign up, you take some classes. The classes are generally dirt cheap. It was like $10 a class for like, and you get to use like studio grade equipment. And then once you pass the class, then you can check out any of their equipment for free.
So cool. What a resource.
And so they train you, they teach you how to do storyboarding, they teach you how to do like I got my first training in green screen there. And I already had a lot of audio background, but they also kind of taught me some tricks in terms of like filmmaking audio specifically. And that was a great resource. And then through that, I made the Zero's Rainbow Warriors, and then I started pitching it around. I collected all the rejections I need. I haven't heard back from Sesame Workshop for the past month. I'm assuming that, I mean, maybe Jordan over there didn't read it or whatever. That's fine. I also I was like, well, if we're gonna do this, like I'm very opinionated.
I want to collect the whole set.
Basically, like now I have values that I don't want to compromise on now, like that I've been able to develop. And one issue that I see, and I guess this flows right into a major issue that I see in the industry today, and it's been there pervasive, because I found when I was at the Fred Rogers Center, I found some articles written by not Fred Rogers, but people on his team that were seeing the same thing that I see today. And that is, and it's not anyone's fault. There's amazing people like Chone's Media. I don't want to knock on Chone's Media, because everyone that I've met is super nice and super encouraging. And it's not an individual problem. It's a systemic problem, in the sense that having a deep understanding of child development psychology is not valued in this industry.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Are you a good animator? Are you a good writer? You know, like they hire people to be consultants, but the actual creators themselves are not. And I think that's a big problem. Because I think because you listen to the consultant, and what do? You make the final call, right? So like what they say, if they don't communicate the importance of something correctly or whatever, you might think, that's not a big deal, and then you might make a creative decision that is actually not the best idea, right?
Well, and I want to pipe into something on this.
Sure, thanks.
Because when I worked with children's product development, right?
Yeah.
I had extensive child development background, but one of the things that I laugh about is, you know, like, none of us had kids that were making the products. You know what I mean? We're all a bunch of like kids in our 20s, 30s. None of us had the experience to really know products that well for kids. And I feel like one thing that is like happening in the industry is you have all these people who aren't really connected that much with kids.
Yeah.
Right? Making this content, you know, like, and I say this in like with the greatest respect, you know, you have research teams, we had research teams in our group too, you know, with child products. But there's something very different about the Fred Rogers of the world, where you have this internal, you know, reach for knowledge, understanding. You know, like he had weekly meetings with his mentor, who is in child development. And
yeah, I'm blanking on her name, but
I'm blanking on her name too right now.
She was a apparently, like, she never wrote any books or anything like that, but she took on a handful of people, and she helped them grow to be the best version of who they are, and definitely did that with Fred Rogers. Like, she was a catalyst. Like, I think like people viewed her like she was a catalyst for so many great works. She was phenomenal.
She was absolutely phenomenal.
And I don't know her name.
I don't know her name. I have.
She never wrote anything.
Yeah, like I have like an entire like PDF file thing on her and Fred that I've read a few times, but I'm blanking on it too. But it's like with this entire point, it's like we're at this point in the industry where we have essentially kids are, you know, being thrown content that's to grab their attention. You know, it's to...
Right.
It's not necessarily meant to help them grow as people.
Right.
And I think that's the difference with Fred Rogers' content, is he wasn't trying to get their attention. He was trying to talk to them as people and help them grow. And help them feel heard, help them feel understood, help them ask questions. You know, like the part that's like that holistic human experience of being a child versus the, you know, take your kid to an entertainer for an hour and just get flash entertainment. Does that satisfy your soul? You're left with the hole afterwards. You know what I mean? And that's, I think, the problem with kids media now. You have lots of holes being built.
There's a big push, and because when I do like YouTube content, I talk with a lot of people who are in the industry. I have to take everything with a grain of salt. Not that they don't have any valid points. They definitely have valid points, but I can't take it at face value, because they're like, well, you should make, like, kids view short content, so you should make short content, which is also not true.
Yeah,
if that's true, then why are there YouTube channels that have literally hour-long? They have like hour-long videos, right? I guess.
Why is Disney still making long movies?
Why are they making exactly? So
kids can watch long content.
There's some silly ideas that get pushed around as facts. But that's one of them.
It's totally silly. And I was reading an article about that this morning, and it's like, you know, there's something to having blips of content that can be beneficial, right?
Yeah.
There's something good, but the thing is, it's like, if you are trying to create revenue or clicks or whatever, I get it. Like, okay, you want so much viewing time, you want so many clicks, and you have to show your end user, who is like your investors, that you're growing. Right.
And that's where the corporation side of it, like, and children's media makes a lot of money.
Absolutely.
And that, you know, I think that push, like, is that good for the child, is the question, right?
Absolutely.
And should we be catering to children's short attention spans, or should we be helping them grow longer attention spans? And when you watch Fred Rogers, another thing I want to say to that, because you said, like, he wasn't like making short content. He definitely wasn't doing it the way, but he was doing it in his own way.
But he had blipped content, right, too. It's like, because his program, it's like he had, and I think that's one of the things that we have to think about too, is like, we should have short content and long content.
Short and content.
We need we need both.
We definitely need
both. It can't just be one or the other. And I think that's like, this whole thing is a big push is to get rid of long content, essentially, or to have shorter long content, right? Instead of a half hour, have 15 minutes, or instead of 40 minutes, have 20 minutes.
And then also there's an argument, like, should children, how long of a video should children watch too, right?
Yes.
Like, should they? But if you're sitting there and if you're sitting there for an hour watching 2-minute videos, then you might as well watch, like, you can go into so much more depth and explore humanity so much more with an hour-long story than a 2-minute story.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, and this brings us to, I think, the YouTube thing.
The YouTube. All right.
Let's talk about this.
Okay. Let's talk about it.
So YouTube right now, we're in a really interesting thing. YouTube is literally the #1 place kids are getting their content, like #1.
For better or worse.
Yeah. And I can say, like, I love YouTube. My #1 place I consume media. I don't know if is that off or on.
Oh, battery. So okay, we just lost battery.
It's okay. We'll head down. But like, we'll have to finish this on the floor. We'll just finish because what time is it?
We can use your camera.
Yes,
we can switch to your camera, and then.
And what time are we at? I want to make sure.
Yeah, I can't really check my phone.
It's okay.
Right now.
Don't check it right now.
Okay,
just be careful.
And then I'm gonna do one of these.
All right.
Should have done the other times, but that's fine. Figure it out.
It's hard to do that in a tree.
It's hard to do a tree.
It's like clap and fall.
So we both fell out of the tree, and we just my battery died. So we're gonna do the rest out here, and then we're talking about YouTube and the quality at YouTube.
Yeah. And I think #1, YouTube is like hands down the way the kids are consuming content. It's the way we're consuming content now.
Oh yeah.
You can customize what you like. You can find the people you like,
find the
things
you
like.
Whereas a satellite might have hundreds of channels, YouTube has nearly infinite channels.
Yes, it's infinite. Right. You can really.
I don't know how many. I don't know how many like for kids YouTube channels out there. It's hard, but there's a lot. There's more. There's got to be 10 times more everything on YouTube.
So much. And I think that there's two things going on with YouTube. It's like a double-edged sword. It's good and it's bad.
Yes, because with quantity comes reduction in quality and lower of standards. So there's no regulation. There's no regulation. You see that with
or minimal regulation. We'll say minimal.
Right. See that with Jake Paul, the blonde one. I guess they're both blonde, but the one, Jake Paul, where his strategy for marketing to children is illegal on a network. What he does for advertising, where he's like, "Hey kids, buy my merch," like that call to action, and embedded in his video content is actually illegal for broadcast. However, on YouTube, there's not that same regulation, and he does that all the time. And he's been called out by it. There was a big documentary series about him, whatever, like getting into him, and then they pushed him. Like Shane was the person that he pushed him on it, and then he was like, no. And I think because I think the cognitive dissonance. Like I've been doing this since day one. Are you telling me that I've been doing a bad thing to my audience? I think he does care about his audience. I think people would say that he doesn't care. I think he does care deeply about his audience, but yeah, without convincing him to not do it, there's no stopping him. Like he can do that, and that's his right because there's no regulation. So that's an example of
and it's also because he's on YouTube. That's how he makes his money. That's how he's paying his bills. You know, the main thing is, I think we're moving into this world of, you know, you either have to have a platform that's created, which this is my vision. I'd love to see the platform created where it's safe for kids and families.
Right.
You have that. We're not there yet, but we're going to get there, people. But right now, we're in the YouTube world of, hey, parents, what are your kids watching? What kind of videos? That's what, like, there's whole guides to this now. And I think that's the main thing is families need to be aware. Like, okay, #1, they can create the channels that they want for their kids. The kids, like, they can approve it. And, you know, kids should be able to explore. But a lot of the suggested videos coming through, the parents are freaking out about because it's not appropriate for their kids. And I think that that's the main problem with YouTube is it just opens up the internet.
It opens up, all of the internet.
Whole portal.
The whole free speech world of the internet. And at what age is it appropriate for a child to be exposed to that?
And the quality of content, too.
You
have the open box videos, the challenges.
Which I want to talk a lot about that. And then there's, like, stuff that I was talking about off camera, too. There's, like, they take cartoons that kids are familiar with, and then they add adult themes to them. So they'll take
Oh,
Dora
I'm
the
not familiar
Explorer.
with
I talked briefly, but I didn't talk about too much of the adult themes. But they'll take like Dora the Explorer, and they'll actually like make it like a raunchy kind of parody. Like it's a raunchy parody of Dora the Explorer, that kind of thing. I don't know if that specifically is a thing, but I know there's plenty of things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's Arthur becoming a meme where he was like, there was a close up of Arthur's fist, and then it became like a meme, and there was like domestic abuse jokes with it, and
kids are like, "What's going on?" Like, and this is when kids like start asking their parents.
That's
all
not
sorts of
YouTube, to be
questions.
fair. That's just regular internet, but it's related because, and people on YouTube might talk about that.
Jeez.
So our plan, and we're working together, and we're collecting a team of people. We're making content. We're supporting each other,
Absolutely.
and we're trying to figure out
And
how
if you're
to.
a content maker, connect with us.
This channel is first and foremost for people who are like-minded, like Jay and myself. Also for just people who are curious about what the children's media in general, and how to make better content,
And
or
parents,
just like and then parents.
We want input from parents. I think
Absolutely.
that's key.
Parents are the
Tell
expert of
us.
their child. And
Tell us what you
the
want,
child is
what
the
you need, what your kid needs. I think that's huge right
Exactly. So our plan is to make that content, and obviously there's steps. So what are the next steps for you in terms of like your scheme? And like what can people be looking forward to for you?
I think, well, my next steps right now, like I am, like you, developing kids classes. And kids classes, I think, are one of the things I'm most excited about, because when I hosted my first kids class last weekend, my eyes were opened. It was actually 2 weeks ago, because it's that whole thing we were talking about earlier, like, okay, you have like a loose framework of what you're rolling with, what you're going to teach, but the kids open up so much more learning in a class. They like just the questions they ask, the things that come up that are unexpected bring a so much fuller learning experience. And to me, what I'm most excited about is developing content backwards, not in the traditional format, but developing classes that are essentially going to be teaching me of how to develop better content.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing too.
Right?
It's like a research playground.
Yes.
For the material. Like you get kids and they give you your feedback. That's my Abioyo video is only so good as it is because I was asked by children to keep playing that probably over 100, 200 times, somewhere in that ballpark. If not, maybe even more. Like honestly, like there were times where I was like, I felt like a Vegas show. Like I was just like thinking about my grocery list while like giving a performance of my lifetime. But really well rehearsed. And so like, I think that's a fantastic thing. I'm really glad that that's working out for you.
And nature. I want to get the kids connected. I think that's one of my big passions.
That's the hard part with video content. And I think Danny Joe's Treehouse does a great job of this. Shout out to Danny Joe's Treehouse. Check him out.
I haven't even checked him out. Can't wait.
But he does I think he does, because the very concept of his show, I think really inspires kids to go out in nature. So
I love it.
So my show, Zero's Random Warriors, I want kids to look up.
Oh, I love that.
I want them to look up, and I want them to wonder.
I love
that's
that.
what I want them to know enough that they want to know more and keep knowing more.
I love that. What I think too, like I have like a very split personality because of how I grew up, and it's like I find that I'm very much of this like fractal of I'm nature girl, but I'm also designer girl.
Yeah.
And then, my dad was in space, like he was in aerospace.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So I have like this explorer side of me, because of not only space, but because of nature. So it's like these two components of exploration, and I love the concept too, and I think this is one of the things I've developed, and I think that you're like this too. Your show and my show is very similar in that way. We believe in exploration, but not only exploration of the outer world, like this, our 3D reality, but exploration of our inner world. So we're doing inner exploration and outer exploration.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's kind of that's embedded into my shows, that duality, inner and outer. And I think excited to see more about your show too as it keeps going. Cool. Any closing thoughts or anything?
I'm trying to think. I think the main thing I want to leave with today is that media is a tool.
Yes.
And it's like it can work, it can own you, right? It's like one of those things. It's just like any possession you have or anything you engage with. It can work for you or it can work against you. And I really want to set parents up. I want to set myself up. I want to set kids up with the knowledge and the power to use media to learn, to explore, to be entertained, and to become a well-balanced human being. And I think that that's kind of what I want to leave with today, is just that we live in a society of good and bad, and I want to figure out a way that we can help this process for kids and their families and even ourselves, because we're on this journey with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
To just create better content and create better lives and create better experiences that's going to create a better world, you know? And I think that that's kind of what I'm taking from our conversations today, is like, this is just like the little, like, this is the first step on the ladder, you know?
Yeah.
There's a lot more to come.
A lot more to come. So thank you, Jae. This conversation's been fantastic.
Love it.
I have no idea. This is probably like an hour and a half long conversation. So speaking of attention spans, I hope I expanded your attention span. Great. I might split it into segments and then release it as a whole thing too. But yeah, thank you so much for the idea, because I've been meaning to have an interview with. So it was like, we should do a video together. Like, it's interview time. I'm glad that you're the first person, because it's just been so wonderful having your support in my work, and I'm so happy to be supportive of it for your work.
Well, I'm stoked. And I do want to say, the next thing I think we should do as far as exploratory crazy interviews is the night raccoon thing.
Night raccoons!
I don't know why. New York has a problem with raccoons, and I really want to bring this to light, because it's a fascinating underground world.
It's a fascinating underground raccoon world, and
there's correlations to our own realities.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that could be a fun next, thing. Maybe.
Fun next thing. Let's do it, because I got a new low light camera, so we're all good.
And we can dress in like camo.
We can dress as raccoons, so we can fit in.
I like it. I'm liking it.
All right. So that concludes the video. Like, subscribe, and most importantly, please share. I'm trying to get the word out with this revolution. That's
share,
the biggest way to
people. Share with 3 people.
Yeah, share with 3 people.
Start the conversation.
Start a conversation with your kids.
Any kid. Great. Could be a cousin, a nephew.
Could be some random kid at a playground.
Your neighbor kid. It could be a kid at a playground. Except don't scare them. Don't be stranger danger.
Don't be a creep. Don't be a creep.
Don't be stranger danger. They know about those.
All right. Peace.
Peace.